Do you associate intimate relationships with panic and overwhelm, with a chronic gut pain, or with the feeling of being trapped? Well, then you're not alone, because I had this for years, and my biggest wish was always just to feel normal and to feel relaxed with my partner. But the good news is that there is a way to make relationships feel not so painful and anxiety driven anymore. Because after a full hand of breakups and through years of therapy, I figured out 5 game-changing lessons that completely transformed my relationship life. Therefore, in today's video, I will reveal to you why intimate relationships might overwhelm you in the first place and what exactly you can do to finally feel safer and calmer. Let's have some breakthroughs together. Welcome to today's episode. My name is Robert, and if you're new here, I'm not a healthcare professional myself, but instead I share a client's perspective here on this channel. Let's start today's episode on the surface. So what is actually overwhelm and how does it feel like in intimate relationships? And maybe you have noticed the feeling of overwhelm like this before. You're with someone you care about, or you're dating this person or are already in a relationship with that person, and everything could be great. Everything somehow is happy and could be lovely, but suddenly there is this uneasy feeling in your stomach. You feel kind of overwhelmed, like everything is too much, and your chest tightens and your stomach drops and you can't think straight, just want to shut down or escape from this person. It also might show up as panic or irritation or even complete emotional numbness. I made a full episode on all of these physical symptoms up here. And the moments that are supposed to feel intimate or connected, then your body reacts like it's somehow under threat. And because of that, emotional dysregulation takes over. You find yourself snapping at your partner or that person, or you completely withdraw. And maybe you also freeze or you stonewall. And afterwards, you don't even know what happened. And the worst part, all of this doesn't make any rational sense to you. You just know that relationships somehow are always pretty damn uneasy for you. And the following becomes a pattern if you haven't broken through it yet. You also start pulling away to protect yourself. You might cancel plans, you might ghost, you break things off, even when a part of you wants the connection. And to the outside world, it might just look like you're distant or you're avoidant, but on the inside, you're fighting to feel safe. And if that's familiar to you, you're not alone, because these are surface symptoms of something much deeper. So if all of this is happening to you on the surface level, the panic, the shutdowns, the emotional roller coaster, what is actually going on underneath? What you can't really rationally explain. Here's the truth. It's your nervous system reacting to something. And your nervous system, if it's reacting like that, is not broken. It's not malfunctioning, no, it's overprotecting. This is also what I learned, for example, in my second therapy. My therapist always said, Robert, you have a really heightened response to that, and you really need to protect yourself in those scenarios. And this is exactly what is feeling so painful and so overwhelming to you, this overreaction within the central nervous system. Because somewhere deep down, your nervous system learned that being close to someone can be very dangerous, that connection might lead to rejection, to humiliation, to abandonment, or to total loss of control. Sounds familiar? Well, for me this was and still is very often the case within intimate relationships. So your system goes into the so-called survival mode. Let's use the polyvagal model, which is a theory of the central nervous system, to understand what's going on inside your body. And don't worry, I won't make it too scientific here. My second therapist always explained it to me like this. We usually have 3 or basically 4 states on 3 levels. We have the so-called social engagement state. I think that makes sense. It's the state where you're relaxed, calm, full of compassion, in presence. And then we have 3 dysregulated states. We have the fight state, where you are angry, enraged, where you're ready to protect yourself, needing to set really rigid boundaries, where you're irritated. We have the flight state, where you feel this sense of overwhelm and panic and anxiety and just want to escape the relationship. And we have the freeze state, where you feel numb and disconnected, where you feel trapped within the relationship. And we also feel dissociated, where you feel disconnected from yourself in a way. I always describe this disconnected, dissociated state as being slightly drunk, but in a really uncomfortable way. Within the fight-flight mode, your nervous system scans every moment for threat. This is what you're actually feeling then. Your body is staying in hypervigilance mode. And I made a full episode about hypervigilance up here. When you have that, your brain goes on overload and eventually you burn out emotionally or you shut down entirely in those moments. And this is not random. This is usually starting already in childhood, especially if you had emotionally unsafe caregivers. If love was inconsistent, was critical, was smothering or absent, your body learned early on closeness is a pretty risky business. And this is, by the way, also how attachment wounds form. So your attachment style. There are different attachment styles that show up when early sense of safety is missing or disrupted. If you become anxious attachment style, then you might cling tightly to others, always fearing they will leave you. If you become avoidant, then you'll learn to shut down your needs and keep people at a distance to feel control. And if you're disorganized, your system learned that love and danger are kind of the same thing, so you crave closeness and fear at the same time. And we have a full playlist about all the attachment styles. I will link the main episode up here and of course in the description below. And below this episode, there's also a full list of 8 episodes, 2 episodes on each attachment style. So if you're interested in that, definitely check this out on our channel. Well, in the end, no matter how your attachment style or the overwhelm shows up, it all comes back to one truth. Your central nervous system is doing everything it can to protect you from a kind of pain that it once knew pretty well. But here's the good news about that. What your nervous system learned can be relearned, and safety can be rebuilt. How? Let's explore that next. During my years of therapy, I've learned 5 lessons that led to 5 major breakthroughs that completely transformed the way how I experience relationships today. But these weren't instant fixes, that's for sure. They were realizations, massive aha moments and periods that slowly cracked something open in me and helped me understand why I felt so overwhelmed by closeness for so long. So here are 5 things that helped me to feel safer in relationships in the exact order I experienced these in the past 5 years and during my full time of therapy. Lesson number 1, what I experienced and learned first within my first therapy was understanding my sensitive nervous system. So I was realizing, and that was my very first breakthrough in therapy, that I'm just a really sensitive person. And I don't mean that in a negative way, I mean that literally. I'm what's often called a highly sensitive person, an HSP. It means that my nervous system processes things more deeply, a so-called sensory processing sensitivity. I feel more, I notice more, I get overstimulated faster. But you can also see that in my content, because if you scroll back to the old videos, 2021, 2022, you see primarily HSP content. And this is how I also started this channel. And by the way, I still have this book. Let me check. This is what I read in 2021, The Highly Sensitive Person, right? How to Strive When the World Overwhelms You. Elaine Aron. Still one of the most helpful books and something what I read in the beginning of my therapy. And before I understood that concept through working with my first therapist, the concept of HSP, for the longest time, I just thought that there was something wrong with me because other people didn't get drained the way that I did. They could handle more noises, could handle more emotion, more intensity, and I would be the one who needed to leave early or I would shut down in a way. But once I understood that my system is just wired differently, everything started making way more sense to me. I understood that it wasn't a flaw that I was sensitive. It was my body's way of protecting me. And that shift from what is wrong with me to, oh, I just feel things more deeply was the beginning for me of everything changing also in my relationships. And this could also be relatable to you, or you recognize that you're a neurodivergent person, for example, having autism and or ADHD or something similar. The first step, this step of recognizing, that's always the foundation. And this is why I also have so many super popular videos here on the channel regarding the identification of those conditions like ADHD, autism, HSP. Definitely feel free to browse a bit through the channel to explore these kind of videos. Lesson number 2 that transformed my relationships was understanding and expressing my needs. My second breakthrough through my first therapy was definitely understanding just how hard it was to me to express my needs. And the thing is, for a really long time, I didn't even know what I needed, let alone how to say it out loud. Because behind that was also the deep belief that my needs are bad and wrong. This is what I learned early on somehow. So afraid of being myself with my needs, I would hope that people would just somehow guess and just know what I needed. And when they didn't or expressed their needs before mine, I felt not seen, not heard, and I got frustrated, quite resentful. Sometimes I got even angry, and not because I wanted to explode, but because I felt invisible and suppressed. The truth is, you can't feel safe in a relationship if you never feel seen. And no one can see you if you're hiding your needs. Learning to understand that your needs are okay and to say things like, I just need my space right now, or I'm not okay with this, felt terrifying at first. But over time, those things became one of the most powerful things that I've learned. I know that the whole topic of needs is a really big knot for people with complex trauma, especially because needs are so complex when you experience trauma. And this is why I also created a full class around needs on our premium community. We have that right here, recognizing and communicating needs. And I came up with around 7 courses I see right here. And I add more courses regularly here. Understanding your basic needs, communicating your needs, but also the complexity of needs within complex trauma, how to meet your needs for safety, for connection, for space. All these kinds of topics are difficult for people with complex trauma. And if you're struggling with your needs as well, or you're not aware what you need, I highly recommend this course. If you want to join our platform and courses, just go to understandable.net, start your 7-day trial now, and try the courses for free. Lesson number 3 that I have learned was to name my emotions. And that was my third breakthrough, to actually name emotions. It sounds so simple, but for years, I couldn't really describe what I was feeling. I wasn't even aware of the exact fact that I didn't know that. I just knew that I was overwhelmed or numb or suddenly reactive, subconsciously, but I couldn't tell you why. And turns out that I wasn't lacking emotional control, I was lacking emotional clarity instead. And then one day, I remember that very clearly, my second therapist introduced me to the so-called emotion wheel. Have that right here. Boom. Really helpful thing, massively. This simple thing had completely changed the game for me because suddenly I had words for things that I never knew I was allowed to feel. I show it to you. It's here in class number 2. If you enter that, course 2.1, we have the emotion wheel. And we have so many different nuances and emotions that I never knew. Feeling thin-skinned, feeling fatigued, feeling ashamed, feeling exposed, feeling vulnerable, all these different nuances. And once I could name those feelings without judging them, I started to realize, man, wait, I'm not crazy, I'm just overwhelmed and scared. And that's pretty human. And naming an emotion doesn't just give it a language, it also gives your nervous system a signal that says, you're not alone in this, I see you. And that moment of self-recognition, this is where regulation begins. And then there was the fourth lesson, which was addressing the core issue of why intimate relationships feel so overwhelming, understanding my lack of boundaries. So the fourth breakthrough was realizing that I didn't have emotional boundaries. Not really physical ones. Well, partly, because the physical part of the body is always involved in trauma as well, but more emotional and mental boundaries. So if you hear this right now, you might find it quite obvious if someone constantly feels thin-skinned, exposed, at the mercy of others. But for me, it was not that obvious. I would constantly feel like this, like too close, too exposed, or like I was being swallowed by the other person's emotions or expectations. And the worst part of that was that I didn't even know I was allowed to protect myself from that. I felt like chaos meant losing myself, like I had to choose either connection or safety. And this is exactly the major feeling of overwhelm that I try to address in the title of this video. But here's what I realized during time. Without boundaries, love starts to feel like invasion. With boundaries, love can feel like connection and still be safe. I had to learn that saying no doesn't make me cold. So taking my space doesn't mean I'm abandoning someone else or my partner in this scenario. And protecting my inner world doesn't make me selfish. It makes me emotionally resilient. It wasn't easy, but once I started to build those invisible walls around my nervous system, I stopped feeling so raw all the time. I would stay in connection instead of raw. And because I know very well that this task can be nearly impossible for someone who's in the beginning of their healing journey, I've also created another full class around that topic that you can also access as a member at understandable.net. If you start your free trial, you can just go to class number 4, Setting Healthy Boundaries, and there we have multiple courses exactly on that topic. And then we have lesson number 5, Building Inner Holding, or self-containment. Last but not least, and this now might sound a bit difficult at first, but the 5th and maybe most powerful breakthrough for me was learning to hold myself emotionally. But I have to admit that this came much later after therapy, and honestly, I also partly learned it through journaling myself, through self-work, and even through talking to ChatGPT. Yes, meaning no therapist ever could truly explain to me how this actually feels, which is insane because I've spent around $4,000 into professional therapy. But here's the thing. I used to believe someone else had to hold me when things got hard. And I experienced early on that sometimes no one would hold me if I needed hold. That I needed someone out there to fix it, to soothe me, to validate me, or to make me feel safe. And as a child, this might have been actually right. But I'm not a child anymore, neither are you watching right now. Probably, I guess, but slowly. I began to realize over time, if no one's there today, I can also be the one who stays with me. When a wave of emotion hit, I didn't have to numb it. I don't have to collapse under it or offload it to someone else. I could say to myself, this is fear, this is shame, and I can hold this. That's what therapists call self-containment, the ability to create a safe space within yourself. Because if you constantly run away from your own overwhelm and no one else is there to hold that space, this is what we call self-abandonment, guys and girls. And the more I practiced self-containment, the safer I felt and the less I abandoned myself. Not just in solitude, but more importantly, also in connection. Because here is the truth again, you can't feel safe with others if you don't feel safe with yourself. And also something that I would like to add here. This is not about becoming hyper-independent. This is about becoming deeply self-connected. Learning to meet your own emotions with compassion instead of fear, and doing that, becoming someone I could finally trust to stay. This is the cherry on top and the lesson you might learn if you already mastered the level of emotions, of needs and boundaries, like for example I show in the pyramid here on our website. So those are the basic levels: connecting with yourself, foundation, and then you feel, express emotions, communicate needs, set boundaries. And in the top levels, we have building trust and self-worth, and also building an authentic self. And there we have it, self-containment, reparenting. Those are top level things that I learned last. Let me know in the comments if you're already there and build self-containment yourself, and if you know how that feels like, because this feeling of how self-containment actually feels, it's so difficult to describe. And this is why no therapist could explain that to me that way, because you have to experience and to perceive it, to feel it. Well, now looking back, every one of those 5 breakthroughs had one thing in common, that I was not broken. I was just unprotected, and I was feeling that way. And rarely had anyone ever taught me how to feel safe in close relationships. Not emotionally, not mentally, or even physically. At least this is how I seemed to perceive it when I was young. And that's the key insight I want to leave you with. Close relationships don't feel overwhelming because something's wrong with you. They feel overwhelming because your system was never shown how to feel safe while staying connected. Most of us learned to survive connection and not to enjoy it. We learn to monitor, to suppress or abandon ourselves just to be close to someone else. And to end this video today with an uplifting message, here is the hidden truth. It doesn't have to stay that way, guys and girls. You can learn to recognize your sensitivity as a strength. You can learn that your needs are okay and to express what you need. You can learn to feel your emotions without drowning them. You can set boundaries that keep you in connection instead of pushing people away. And most importantly, you can also learn to hold yourself no matter what shows up. That's all not just healing. That's coming home to yourself. And when you feel safe with yourself, love stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like something you can actually stay for. What do you think about the whole topic? Is the overwhelm now clearer to you? Are you struggling with that overwhelm in relationships? I'm pretty curious to read your comments if you want to share that. And if you want to support the podcast, definitely go to understandable.net, become a member of our platform, and I see and speak to you in the next episode. Have a great, hopefully less overwhelmed day.